aliens have arrived on Earth. Known as the Visitors, they claim to be our friends, and that they are here as they need some Earth resources, and in return they'll reward the people of Earth with many great technological advancements. However, despite the propaganda and cool sunglasses, and let's be honest, they are pretty cool, these aliens aren't our friends, but in fact sinister reptilian creatures who are here to conquer, enslave, and to eat us. Where the world plummets into chaos with society breakdowns. And it's up to a group of rebels to make a stand to these new oppressors and to put a stop to this destructive way of life and hostile takeover. In this classic TV series, which is one part science fiction spectacle and one part cautionary tale about the evils of fascism and just how easily manipulated the human race can be. So today, me and my blockbuster hat are going to explore the history of V, a show which started off as a couple of compelling miniseries, but seemed to have lost its momentum with a full-length series that followed. So, let's check it out. V is the brainchild of screenwriter and filmmaker Kenneth Johnson. He had a successful career in TV, having worked on the TV show The $6 Million Man, as well as creating The Bionic Woman and developing the Incredible Hulk TV series. I guess the point is, this guy knew a thing or two when it came to television. In the early 80s, Johnson wrote a script where he took inspiration from the 1935 book It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. The novel itself was a cautionary tale about the evils of fascism and ultimate power, as the story focuses on an American politician who rises to power to the point where he becomes a dictator, which leads to kangaroo courts and civil war and all kinds of mayhem. The story was set in a parallel 1930s America, and was said to be a commentary on Hitler's rise to power at that time. Johnson wrote a script based off It Can't Happen Here called Storm Warnings, and was pitching it around. His script found its way to NBC, who saw potential for the script to be a mini-series. But there was one problem. NBC just found it too damn surreal and weird, and didn't find the premise of a fascist regime starting within America to be believable. Nor did they think audiences would be interested in a story about a fascist regime taking over the world. However, there was still a glimmer of hope, and that came in the form of Star Wars. Thanks to that movie, there was now a huge rising interest in science fiction. So it was decided to take Johnson's Storm Warning script and inject some Star Wars spectacle into it, where the story became V, and the evil regime trying to take over the world was no longer of this world, but rather lizard alien creatures known as the Visitors, who want to enslave and eat humans, because let's be honest, we're pretty delicious. Ones that appear to be friends, but have a secret, terrifying agenda. Sinister monsters from beyond our comprehension. Warner Brothers also got involved to back the project, and V was officially greenlit. I love how having human dictators seems silly and unbelievable, but alien visitors? Ha! Now that's where it's at. That's the true story that people can get behind. The show got the name V because of the red V symbol painted over the Visitors' propaganda posters by the Human Rebellion, which means Viva Victory. The letter V being used as a symbol for victory, which is a real-life symbol, is one that has been around since World War II, and was commonly used back then. So I guess within the show's context, it makes sense that the logo was created by a Holocaust survivor, Abraham Bernstein. But it's also been suggested that the symbol could date back as far as 1415. Calling the show V definitely gives the show a unique title, and it does catch your attention. It makes you think, V, what on earth could that be about? It has also been suggested that the red costumes that we see the Visitors wear may have inspired Michael Jackson's attire in his Thriller music video, but that's just speculated. But yeah, they do look similar. Due to the show's larger-than-life science fiction setup, it's been stated that all up, the show may have cost $13 million to make, which is quite unique for a TV show at that time. And every time a laser was used in the show, that supposedly would cost up to $1,000. And also what didn't help is that the shoot was very tight with lots of overtime and 7-day weekly workloads in order to reach its May 1st, 1983 broadcasting deadline, with Kenneth Johnson both writing and directing the series. Throughout V's 2 miniseries and eventual TV series, there was a large lineup of cast members and characters. Some of these include, but not limited to, Jane Badler as Diana, Mark Singer as Mike Donovan, Faye Grant as Juliet Parrish, Robert Englund as Willie, Frank Ashmore as Martin, Michael Durrell as Robert Maxwell, Richard Hurd as John, Peter Nelson as Brian, Richard Lawson as Ben Taylor, David Pecker as Daniel Bernstein, Blair Tefkin as Robin Maxwell, June Chadwick as Lydia, Michael Wright as Elias Taylor, Sarah Douglas aka Ursa from Superman 2, Thomas Hill aka the bookstore guy from The Neverending Story, Lane Smith aka Perry White from Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, and Michael Ironside as Ham Tyler. Sadly though, as the production started, tragedy would strike, as actress Dominique Dunn, who is probably best well known for starring in Poltergeist, was originally cast as Robin Maxwell. And on the night of October the 30th, 1982, while doing rehearsals for V at her place of residence in West Hollywood with her co-star, David Packer, Dunn's psychotic ex-boyfriend showed up, and after an altercation, he murdered the young actress. Admittedly, this would have been a devastating shock to the production of V, which due to the events, its production went on a 2-week hiatus. However, sad as the situation is, her part would be recast with the as-mentioned Blair Tefkin, and the miniseries would be dedicated to Dunn's memory. And supposedly, some shots featuring the back of her head still made it into the show. V had a very unique marketing campaign, where posters claiming the visitors are your friends, as seen in the show, started appearing around subways around the US, with no hint or clue as to what these posters mean. Also, as seen in the show, several days later, the posters had a big red V painted over them, which further intrigued and possibly got commuters thinking, what is going on here? Either way, V was coming and was about to knock a nation off its feet. When V's 2 parts were broadcast in May 1983, viewers were hooked, with it becoming NBC's highest rated show in 2 years. Audiences were no doubt fascinated with the exciting science fiction aesthetic, while also being shocked by the real-life parallels of society being invaded and corrupted by a fascist regime, with many World War II parallels. A follow-up miniseries immediately followed with V: The Final Battle, which now consisted of 3 episodes. However, during the production of the follow-up series creator Kenneth Johnson, who was overviewing the series, had created conflict with NBC and Warner Bros. Television, who were worried that under his writing and directing, the budget would get out of control, and so due to tensions flaring up, he left the production. And his work on the second miniseries would be credited with the pseudonym Lillian Weezer. And I can't help but feel like that has to be some kind of insult. Seriously, that has to be some kind of stab at him. Lillian Weezer? That's a terrible pseudonym. Regardless, Johnson left NBC altogether, but several years later he would create the Alien Nation TV show for Fox. The Final Battle also featured music from 3 different composers, in order to get 3 different perspectives, including the Warriors composer, Barry D. Vorzon, NCIS composer, Joseph Conlan, and frequent Star Trek composer, Dennis McCarthy. In fact, some of his V music would go on to be recycled for Star Trek: The Next Generation. V: The Final Battle was broadcast in May 1984, and just like the previous series, The Final Battle was very successful, celebrating high ratings, even beating fellow TV miniseries The Last Days of Pompeii, which aired the same day. It also received positive reviews too, with the Boston Globe feeling that V: The Final Battle was actually better than the previous series, and a review from New York Times stating, quote, "In its own dizzy way, V is rarely less than compelling." V: The Final Battle was also nominated for 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. So needless to say, when it comes to 1980s television, V had become a pop cultural phenomenon. From October 1984 to March 1985, V would get a full-length TV series, consisting of 19 episodes. And from the get-go, there were issues with the TV series, including budgetary issues, with the series only having half the budget of the previous miniseries. As story consultant David Abramowitz puts it, now they had half the money, half the time to shoot the show, half the sets, half the special effects, and half the characters. Simply put, everything had now been halved, which made it difficult maintaining the quality of the show. Even shots from the previous miniseries had to be reused for the TV series. But regardless, the production soldiered on in order to make V a now weekly occurrence. Not only was there now more V, but also more merchandise too, which included novelizations which would continue the V stories, and DC Comics also released a comic book series based on V, which was to run concurrent with the series and be part of the storyline at large, of which these comics truly did have some amazing artwork. LJN released a V doll and was planning a toy lineup of V action figures, but despite some prototypes, the toy line was dropped and never produced due to the show facing low ratings. Yes, this new series, which was considered to be the definitive direction to take the V franchise, was not as successful, as many viewers were switching off. One major thing attributed to this was the fact that the show felt messy and disorientating, with the focus on characters changing, as well as characters disappearing, and the show's intro and theme also changing. It's been suggested that this could have left viewers confused and like they may have missed a couple of episodes or watching reruns. And so it came to be that the V series was cancelled. Unexpectedly, mind you, with the show's 20th episode being planned but never ended up going into production, leaving the series with a shortened 19 episodes, ending on a cliffhanger which would never get resolved. And so that was the end of V the series, and seemingly V in general, well, at least in its original form. Yes indeed, this once gripping story that intrigued and fascinated people had now run its course. The DC Comics also had a drop in readers, and so it was also discontinued. But at least the comics were able to create a conclusion to the series, writing a two-part story based on the abandoned 20th episode. You know, reading up on the show for this episode, it did seem that there was a sudden sharp decline. I just wonder if things would have been different had the show had a bigger budget with more quality and care. There were several attempts in the preceding years to bring back V, including a proposed sequel series called V The Next Chapter, which was pitched in 1989 but was ultimately rejected. However, jump 20 years later to 2009, and V would finally get a revival series, now on ABC, which ran for 2 seasons consisting of 22 episodes. There was great hype for this new series, which was a reboot with nods to its predecessor. It starred Morena Baccarin, aka Deadpool's girlfriend, and Jade Badler returns as Diana. But, oddly, as this is a reboot, this isn't the Diana from the original series, but a new character, who also just so happens to be called Diana. Yeah, that's one way to confuse the audience. However, there were issues brewing behind the scenes, namely the production having to be temporarily stopped by the Writers Guild after original series creator Kenneth Johnson put in a request for his created by credit removed from the show, as he felt that it strayed greatly from his original premise, and that this V was more or less its own thing. And so the conflict was investigated, and the Writers Guild more or less said, nah, your name's gonna stay on the show whether you like it or not. For the most part, the revival series did get positive feedback and seemed to be well received. However, in 2011, the show's cancellation was announced, and there are 2 reasons given for the show's cancellation. 1, a drop in ratings, again, and 2, it's been suggested that ABC were worried about advertiser backlash as the show apparently kept violating content boundaries set by the FCC. Now, there was a campaign by fans known as Project Alice, where fans were writing to Warner Brothers pleading with them to renew the show, but on channel TNT. But the pleas fell on deaf ears, and that was the end of this version of V. So where does this leave V in hindsight? Well, V has gone on to be considered one of the greatest science fiction franchises of all time, and probably one of the scariest too. One that is widely celebrated today, which seems to really resonate with people, to which many people now find it more relevant than ever. The show can be seen as a fun, silly science fiction horror show with lizard aliens arriving on Earth to enslave us, but there is so much more to it than that. Underneath its sunglasses and red disco suits, there was a story that was very real and very frightening. A warning about how evil regimes can divide, take over, and conquer, and just how easily tricked the human race could be. It demonstrates how propaganda and media can be used by evil forces to manipulate people on a mass scale, creating a cult-like thinking sensibilities, and how powerful imposing forces whom take full control over civilization can lead to complete collapse and chaos. V teaches us to question everything and stand up for what's right, and more importantly, stand up for our own instincts, even if that means going against the grain, and to be mindful of powers gaining more totalitarian control. Basically, it's a show about the evils of fascism, shown through the lens of being a story about aliens, and although it's an intriguing science fiction spectacle, it can also be viewed as a cautionary tale. I am almost certain that V will come back in some capacity. Maybe a movie, maybe another series. Either way, I really don't think that this is the last we've heard of the Visitors. Now, it is easy to draw comparisons with V and elements of the real world throughout history, and that just goes to show how brilliant the writing was. How it kind of perfectly shows a realistic collapse of order in favour of evil regimes and brutalities. And really, that's quite the accomplishment, considering it's a show about lizard people. Anyway, I'm Minty, and remember, V for victory. See ya!